So now that Sonic September is over, it's time to move on to my Halloween reviews. To start, I decided to finally get around to talking about the second NES Castlevania game, and the one that usually gets a bad rep. Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Let me throw out right there that yes, the game is flawed, but it is still a very enjoyable and fun game. It starts off with Simon Belmont, who has defeated Dracula in the prior game, but with a catch. Basically, he is now cursed and has learned that the only way to lift it is to find 5 of Dracula's body parts, now scattered across the land, and bring them back to Dracula's castle, to essentially resurrect the Master Vampire and defeat him once and for all. Of course, there's a bunch of undead creatures that are out there to make sure that this doesn't happen. At its core, Castlevania 2 is an action RPG. Not unlike Legend of Zelda's often scorned NES sequel, Simon travels amongst the world, whipping enemies with various weapons and entering several mansions to find Dracula's body parts, consisting of a rib, tooth, eye, heart, and a ring. Once you find them all, you need to finally find Dracula's resting place, put all of the items in the coffin, and watch as Dracula rises from the dead. Then you just try killing the bastard. Of course, there's much more to find. You have crystals that help solve puzzles, various whips that will upgrade Simon's attack power, and other sub-weapons that will help Simon in various ways. But I think I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Let me try to explain the game in order of progression. Simon begins in the town, and although I would love to give you the name, I will admit that I will not because I can't remember what it is. Sure, I could look it up, but this begins one of the major issues with Castlevania 2. You're never sure exactly where the hell you are at. Towns are given names but are not always apparent. On rare occasion you may find a villager that will give you information on where you are standing, but usually you're told to enter a certain town, but when you get to the next village, you're not sure if this is the exact one. Same occurs with the other locales. There are the 5 mansions, all of which that have names, but no signs or other indications on whether it's the right one or not. So just because you're told to go to a certain area doesn't mean it's going to be easy to see if it's the right one. This isn't the only problem you'll run into right off the bat. Simon can talk to the townsfolk by pressing up, and then a short text box will appear to explain what the villager will tell you. If you press any other button while the text box is on the screen, however, it will disappear. This isn't always an issue with villagers, because you can easily just talk to them an additional time and be sure not to press anything. But the same problem happens when trying to pick up items. In the mansions, you can find hint books hidden in the walls. They're very cryptic and really don't seem to help much, but they are there. In any case, if you pick one up, the text will immediately show up on the screen. But if you accidentally press a button, it'll disappear, making you wonder what it was trying to tell you. Worse, the book isn't added to your inventory. Instead, if you wish to try reading it again, you'll have to completely exit the mansion and then re-enter it. Who's really gonna do that? Granted, the books aren't entirely useful, but they are there, and completionists may want to have the self-satisfaction of finding them all, so this mechanic should have been fixed. Anyway, back to the town. You probably won't be able to get very far, because as you're exploring the town, chances are you'll get the infamous message shown here. Get used to it, because you'll be seeing it a lot. Basically, the game has a night and day time system. Every second in real time is 4 minutes in game. Quick day. Time does not change while you're in any buildings though, so if you're talking to a priest to recover your wounds or in a mansion hunting for Dracula's detached slong, well, time won't pass. I actually don't mind the message. What I do mind is that this is one of the few text boxes that doesn't get skipped by pressing a button. So let me recap a bit. You can skip most dialogue, which has the potential of being at least somewhat useful by pressing any key. But if you see a text box that doesn't give you any shred of usefulness, other than telling you, hey dumb shit, the moon's out, well, that you can't skip. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Anyway, once that message comes up, several things happen. If the day turns into night, the villagers will disappear and towns will now be swarmed with zombies. These zombies can easily be farmed for hearts, which is both the currency and sub-weapon ammo. More on that later. In addition, any monsters that are out in the game's fields gain double health. Makes sense. In a nutshell, you're going to want to travel between towns during daylight, at least early in the game when Simon isn't as powerful. That's another topic I'll get to in a bit. Anyway, when daybreak happens, monsters will revert back to their less powerful forms, and towns will be shed from their undead. Before I forget, let me mention that when it's night, all doors in the villages close, so you cannot enter any houses to buy items or even the church to heal. You'd think that the power of the cross would save the church from the undead, but apparently that's either not the case or the priest doesn't want to press his luck. Either way, you'll have to wait for daylight in order to heal. Also keep in mind that you can enter mansions at any time of the day. So let's move on to the field, which is where Simon will spend a good chunk of his life. Whenever you're not in a mansion or town, he'll be out in the fields surrounding Transylvania. Simon uses his whip to destroy any creatures lurking around there. There will be wolfmen, spiders, bats, Medusa heads, skeletons, and other generic horror monsters. The actual bestiary seems kinda light compared to other games of the same genre, but it's not too bad. As Simon defeats these creatures, he'll gain experience points. As he obtains these, he has a chance to level up, which just increases your maximum health bar. If Simon loses all of his lives, his level drops back to 0, but it's simple enough to raise again. The catch to this is that zombies in town don't give you any XP, because otherwise you'll be able to just sit in town and farm them until Simon is at maximum level, at the very start of the game. The other thing about XP levels is that after a certain level, weaker monsters won't give you any XP, forcing you to progress farther into the game in order for Simon to get his most powerful strengths. It may just seem strange, but it does make sense if you think about it. It helps ease the challenge of the game and makes it more gradual. At least, that's how it's supposed to work, but truth be told, the game really isn't all that hard. Before I get going on the difficulty of the game, I'll explain the hearts. Most enemies will drop one of 3 variations of a heart when killed. You have a half heart, small heart, and large heart, which, in order of size, gives you 1, 2, or 4 hearts. These hearts are used as currency to purchase items from the various shopkeepers that you'll encounter. They'll also be used to power some of the sub-weapons Simon finds. Really, the only thing Simon will need will either be the dagger or fire. Both of these use hearts. Simon can find holy water, but is more useful in the mansions. Since I'm on the holy water, I may as well move on to the challenge of the game, or lack thereof. Simon can kill things pretty quickly, and the game actually does start off pretty difficult, since you have no indication on where to go and what to do first. But once you figure things out, enemies start getting way too easy. If you're like me and like to explore every nook of a map, you can find all of the secrets and get powered up fairly easily. But in any case, once you start upgrading your whip and getting more health, enemies drop quickly. The only thing you really have to be mindful of is your life, since it cannot be restored anywhere except for in a church. Sometimes these churches can be a considerable distance from each other, so you have to weigh the choice on proceeding on farther or going backwards to recover your wounds. But the mansions are going to be one of the more frustrating aspects of the game, other than the cryptic puzzles you can find in the fields, which I'll get to eventually. Every mansion has several things you must do before you can exit and say you were successful. Naturally, slaying monsters is pretty much a necessity, but you can pass by any that don't pose you any immediate danger. However, you do have to make sure that you have enough hearts so you can go buy an oak stake from the mysterious guy who sits around in each mansion. You can only carry one at a time, so don't bother trying to stock up. However, once you use it in the mansion you're in, you can be proactive and purchase another one for the next mansion. The option's there, but it's not required to carry one through the fields, as the only use for them is to throw them at the orbs in one of the last rooms in each mansion. By doing so, you'll reveal the appendage to collect. Of course, Konami did a hell of a job translating the game to English, as instead of just possessing the body part, you possess it. Never knew there was an R in there, did ya? Well, now you know, and of course, knowledge is power. Anywho, once you grab the body part, regardless of what it is, you can opt to get out of the mansion immediately, or seek out the shopkeep to buy another stake. I wouldn't recommend going out of your way in order to hunt him down, but if he's on your way, may as well make that extra pit stop to grab it. One other thing to note about these mansions. Yes, they are laid out like a maze, but what makes each worse are the hidden pitfalls hidden in each one. Basically, there are bodies of water in each, which counts as an instant kill since Simon can't swim. There are blocks in each that are secretly not solid. Sure, they may look like you're playing pathways in which you can just walk right on by, but if you're not careful, Simon will fall through one. Typically, the game is at least nice enough to put platforms directly underneath them, preventing you from immediately dying from complete bullshit. But if you jump and go through one of these invisible holes while moving, well then, you might be out of luck. The only true way to avoid them is to equip holy water and constantly spam it. You have an infinite amount of it, and it takes no ammunition of any kind, so you can throw it on the ground to see if you can pass over certain blocks. It seems foolish, considering that these blocks should have been avoided entirely, but they're there and you have to get used to them. They do also appear in the field, but they are somewhat rare in this regard. So let's see, what else do I need to talk about? How about the fact that there is no battery backup? Dang. Well, I guess I can't complain too much, because there is a password system. The passwords are 16 digits long, so it's not the most complicated system ever. Thankfully. Let's talk about the enemies, or even the graphics as a whole. I won't mention much about the sound, because the music is simply fantastic. There's only a small handful of songs, which is disappointing, but each is freaking awesome in its own right. But let's be honest, it's Konami, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. But back to the point. The visuals. Just like the music, for the most part, they're awesome. The graphics change hues a bit, depending on the time of day. The forest is nice and bright when the sun is out, but when the moon shows its face, all gets dark and mysterious. Caverns are dark, mansions are gritty looking. The sprites, good or evil, also look great, with a good amount of detail on them. Simon is given much more color, as opposed to the bland brownish look from the first game. Overall, the creators did an awesome job with the visuals. However, there are a few issues with the enemies. For one, many of them have stupidly predictable patterns. Most enemies just move back and forth, just doing basic damage assignment. In fact, there are times when sometimes weaker demons don't do any noticeable damage assignment. But the bosses are even worse. There are only 3 bosses: Death, some face thing, and Dracula. Even better, other than Dracula, the bosses are completely optional. Don't want to fight them right now? Forever? Just keep walking. Strange. Did they not know how to block the room till the boss died? I mean, they really aren't that hard. And even better, they respawn when you re-enter the room. What the hell? I had to kill Death twice? To obtain the golden dagger twice? That's a head scratcher. Each of the 2 optional bosses gives you a great item to use in your journey. Death has the golden dagger. The face thing has the magic cross. If you choose to fight them, it won't take much effort with the right gear. It's pathetic, really. Dracula isn't any harder. You can literally spam fire or the golden dagger to kill him without him even freaking moving. Now, that's just sad. There are 3 possible endings, depending on how quickly you can finish the game, but from what I've read, the developers screwed up the code, and by taking their longest time, you get one of the better endings. Oops. Of course, getting to Dracula's castle isn't easy. I've already mentioned that this game is a where the fuck do I go deal. The hints don't give you any real clues, and neither do the villagers. The game is pretty notorious for this. I mean, there's a clue to use the red orb at Deborah Cliff, but there's no sign to really signify that this area is Deborah Cliff. You have to drop garlic in a graveyard to force a man to approach you. The cryptic bullshit wouldn't have bothered me so much if it would have been legit clues that you can understand. And if you really want to avoid being pissed off, don't do what I did and accidentally buy an older version of an item you already have. If you do, you'll override it, and we'll have to find the newer and upgraded version again. Another stupid design choice. That's not to say that there's any platforming challenges either, though. There are a few jumps that might force you to throw your controller across the room. The biggest ones are these moving blocks that are rotating vertically in place. You need to use a slight bit of momentum to make the leap to each block. But of course, you can't change direction or speed once you have left the ground, so you need to make sure that you make the jump before you commit to pressing A. I can't really think of anything else to say, so let's wrap this review up. Castlevania 2 Simon's Curse may not be the most easy to play game, but it's still high up on the fun scale. The soundtrack and graphics are phenomenal, and the gameplay as a whole is solid. Sure, there are some what the deuce moments, like the forced holy water throwing or the stupidly cryptic books that disappear as soon as you press a button, but overall, it's a game that should be played if you like action RPGs. Just be sure to have a guide at the ready. Final score? 8 out of 10. This is Reaper. Facebook.com/ReapersReviews. Happy fragging.